My FPL Game Week 31 team selection, the week that the wildcard fell apart. We wildcarded in Game Week 30, and it's fair to say we've got a few issues. We're also planning on activating the assistant manager going into Game Week 31 as well. And with Aston Villa beating Brighton, that all went up in the air as well. So we're going to discuss all of that, my potential transfers, replacements for Gabriel, who is out for the season. We'll talk about Alexander Isak. We'll talk about whether he's a better captain than Mo Salah this week, if he's available as well. And of course, my team and where I plan on putting the assistant manager this week and over the next 2 weeks as well. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. And before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. And Game Week 31 starts very soon. It starts on Saturday morning, a quick turnaround. And in Game Week 30, after the FA Cup, after the Haaland injury, we decided to play the wildcard, and Game Week 30 was the week that the wildcard looks like it may have fallen apart before it's even got going. Game Week 30 at time recording is not quite finished. Chelsea versus Spurs is this evening, but as a Chelsea fan, I'm going to the game, so I will not have time to record by the time I get home this evening. I don't have Cole Palmer. I am on a small green arrow at the moment. I do have Murphy auto sub to come in. But of course, if Cole Palmer, I think if he scores double digits, like if he gets 12 or more, I'll end the game week on a red arrow. But if he scores less than that, I will end the game week on a green arrow. As a Chelsea fan at home to Spurs, that is by far the most important thing. So I will update the sort of rank and stuff after that game as well. So you will see it in the top left-hand corner how I've got on. It's not been great, particularly triple Crystal Palace drawing away at Southampton and only scoring 1 goal. Mateta going off before the 60th minute. Isak did well, but he is now yellow flagged. Marmoush did well. Saka and Foden were the big disappointment. Gabriel with an injury. And of course, the captaincy on Mo Salah being a big, big disappointment. So Saka and Foden are the two things that I look at that I just got massively wrong. I massively overestimated their minutes. Particularly, Foden I just thought would start. Maybe I should have looked at it that they played Leicester, they played the FA Cup, and then they've got Man United, and maybe that was more important. But I just didn't see him not starting that game. I really didn't. I didn't see Grealish playing in a central role as a possibility at all. So yeah, I got that massively wrong. I am hopeful he starts the Man United game, but it's a lot of money to spend on a player who I'm now not certain who's going to start every week, but I don't really have a plan to do anything about that at the moment. And the other one is Saka. Again, I was absolutely certain that he was going to start. If you'd have told me that neither Saka nor Foden was going to start, I would have said that's completely wrong. I massively overestimated Saka's minutes. I just saw he played a behind closed door friendly. Everything Arteta was saying, all the stuff on Arsenal's media about Saka being back, I just was certain he was going to start. Now, he ended up coming off the bench and scoring, and I got quite lucky. And I get Murphy off the bench for Foden and getting quite lucky. Very lucky with both of them. But I just massively overestimated their minutes and have come out okay from it. So a small green arrow. If Palmer doesn't go completely nuclear tonight. If he does well, I'll probably be about flat. If he does really well, I'll probably on a smallish, mediumish red arrow, depending on how many points he gets. I did bench Williams. In theory, I should have started him over Gabriel or over Munoz, but realistically, I was never going to do that. And then the other big bit of news that we got over the past couple, well, actually today at time recording just now, is that the double in Game Week 33 and the blank in Game Week 34 has been confirmed as we predicted and as we expected. So nothing too sort of groundbreaking, no sort of a crazy news, but it has now been announced that we have the doubles and blanks as we expected. So the small thing that the Nottingham Forest Brentford game has stayed in Game Week 34. It's now gone into the midweek of Game Week 34, but it does stay there. So they will still have a single fixture and will have no doubles. But Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Manchester City will all double in Game Week 33, followed by the blank in Game Week 34. That is, as we predicted, all of us who wildcarded in Game Week 30, at least that went in our favour and we got the blanks and doubles that we expected. So the assistant manager 31 to 33, or the bench boost 32, 33, and the free hit in 34 in particular is now as much a strategy as it has ever been. I still think the free hit in 34 is the best way to go. If you're on wildcard this week, we will have a draft in the final decisions complete guide video, which will be out later on Friday. But yes, doubles for Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, Man City, who blank in Game Week 34. Everyone else just has 2 normal sets of game weeks. Of course, Newcastle double in Game Week 32 as well, which we already knew. So then having a look at how my team is before I make any transfers. So at the moment, it looks okay. 0.9 million in the bank, 2 free transfers. Rank still says TBC, but I might update it after the games. At the moment, I'm putting my captains on Alexander Isak. I will wait to see what Eddie Howe says. I do think him away at Leicester over Salah's form at the moment is probably where I'd end up. I just think Leicester look absolutely shot and hopeless at the moment. No offense to any Leicester fans watching, but I'm sure you'll probably agree. Whereas Fulham can be quite difficult to break down at times. So I have gone with Isak, captain, Salah, vice. But depending on what Eddie Howe says in the morning, I might end up swapping that back as Salah is just safer for minutes. I don't really see anyone else in my starting 11 that I'd want to captain. Saka and Foden, I'm not confident on their minutes. Marmoush and Mateta, I'm not certain on either, especially given the fixtures. So Alexander Isak, we will wait and see. The good thing about my front seven is at the moment I'm benching Ismail Assar, so I do have a strong first sub if Alexander Isak was to miss out completely. So I don't really plan on selling it unless he was ruled out for quite a long period of time, which I don't imagine will be the case. I do also have Gabriel. Now, I don't necessarily need to sell Gabriel this week because I have 3 defenders that I could play in Munoz, Dan Burn, and Gvardiol as well, and Burn goes away to Leicester. Sounds like it's been confirmed that Gabriel is going to have surgery on his hamstring and will be out for the remainder of the season. They hope to have him back for the start of next season, basically very similar to what Bukayo Saka did, and he was out for 3 months. That should see Gabriel back at some point for pre-season for them, but out for the rest of the season. So he will need to be sold. So that's how we're lining up at the moment. But of course, it's the week I plan on playing the assistant manager. I had considered delaying the assistant manager and playing the bench boost in either game week 32 or game week 33. The issue with that is Areola and Williams. Areola is really good if you bench boost 33 and Williams is really good if you bench boost 32. So there isn't a particular week, unless I sold one of the 2 of them, that particularly works for the bench boost in the short term. And I don't have loads of transfers with the other issues for me to go and do that. The other issue is I don't love the assistant manager later down the line. If we do get doubles in game week 36 followed by blanks in game week 37, I'm going to need all the transfers around that period to do that and to navigate the blanks and doubles. And I don't want to have to be moving my assistant manager around, which is what you'll have to do if you play it at the end of the season. So I have considered the bench boost in 32 and 33. In theory, if I sold Gabriel this week, let's say I did Gabriel to Saliba and Isak was okay, I could just bench boost this week. It's not completely out of the question that I was just to do that, but I don't think so. I think there's enough potential points with a back-to-back doubles that I could just get the assistant manager, and that is still the plan. So haven't activated it, and because you can't move it once you've activated it, I won't activate it right until the deadline on the deadline stream. So in theory, there's a small chance it won't get activated, but I would say it's most likely. I have considered the bench boost and sort of rejigging the way I use my chips, but I don't think I want to be stuck with the assistant manager at the end when I'm trying to combat later on in the season other things which I'll need a lot of transfers for. So that then leads us to 2 assistant manager options. And what I said going into the deadline was the worst thing for potential assistant manager in 31 to 33 would be Aston Villa beating Brighton. And what happened? Aston Villa have been awful away from home. Brighton have lost just 1 game at home so far this season and actually only lost, I think, 6 games all season in the Premier League. And what happens? Aston Villa go and beats Brighton 3-0 away from home. It was the worst thing that could possibly have happened. Now, when one door closes, another one opens, and there are other possibilities, but it was not what I wanted when it happened initially. So the first and probably most obvious thing would be to do Glasner. In theory, I could go for a manager with table bonus in game week 30. I could go for Graham Potter. In theory, I could go for Thomas Frank. But as a Chelsea fan, I just don't think I'm going to play the assistant manager on Thomas Frank and want Chelsea to lose. Like, I just can't bring myself to do that. So if I was going to go for someone else, it would be Graham Potter at home to Bournemouth, who have now failed to win since game week 25 and have table bonus against Bournemouth at home. And they might still be without Clive at Bournemouth. So it's one I've considered. But is it really worth an extra transfer? I don't think it probably would be. So if I was going to go Glasner, despite them not having table bonus home to Brighton, I probably would just save the transfer and go straight to it. So in order to do Glasner, he would then have 3 table bonus games: Man City away, Newcastle away, and Arsenal away, non-table bonus games at home to Brighton and at home to Bournemouth. If you're chasing rank, this is the best way to go. It has the potential to score 60, 70 points if they beat Newcastle away, beat City away, which I think is very possible, and they beat a few of the others, or they get draw away at Arsenal. It's possible. Glasner has the most upside. In order to do that, I would have to free up a Crystal Palace spot. And to do that, I don't think I'd be willing to sell Mateta because I don't like the replacements for it enough. I'm going to sell Gabriel as well, right? So it would either be, if I was going to sell Munoz, it would be Gabriel and Munoz to Saliba and Konza because Gabriel's injured and I need the Palace spot. If not, it would be Sarr to Rodgers, and then I could do Gabriel to either Konza or Saliba. Probably Saliba if I'm going to go Rodgers. So there's a few different combinations of there. Either I go Munoz to Saliba and Gabriel to Konza, or I do Gabriel to Saliba and Sarr to Rodgers. And again, that would use 2 transfers, but it would give me my double up for the defense in game week 33 with either Saliba or Konza, depending which one I go with. And it would free up a Crystal Palace spot going Glasner as well. With them not getting table bonus against Brighton, though, I was a little bit apprehensive of doing that. And I just look at those away games and think there's a massive risk that they just lose all 3. Again, if you're chasing rank, I do still think it's the best way to go. You could even punt someone in game week 30, but with the likes of Gabriel injury and a few other things, I'm worried a little bit about running out of transfers and taking -4s for things that I don't really want. So if I went Glasner, I think I would just end up going straight there. The ones highlighted in blue, of course, are the table bonus fixtures. So that is the first option. But with the Gabriel injury, I was very much of the opinion before the deadline that I was not going to assistant manager on Eddie Howe, and I was very clear on that. But that's because I didn't know who I'd go to in game week 33 until Gabriel got injured. In which case, I think Arsenal will be slightly weaker defensively. And if I sell Gabriel, because I have to sell him because he's injured, could I free up the Arsenal spot and then actually go Arteta in game week 32? So what that would look like would be Eddie Howe for game week 31 and game week 32. They would have Leicester away, Man United at home, Palace at home. And then I would go to Arteta for Ipswich away and Palace at home. No table bonus, 3 home games. The 2 away games are Leicester and Ipswich as well. So I quite like that. It is safer. It is more boring. The Glasner route has the ability to get 60, 70 points, but it also has the ability to get 10 or 20. I would feel like the Howe Arteta route, I'm pretty certain I'm going to land somewhere between 30 and 45 points. Probably somewhere between 30 and 40, which at my rank, I'm quite happy to do. Now, if Palmer destroys me tonight, I may be more inclined to take a risk, but maybe that's the way to go. There are a few other sort of unwritten benefits of it doing it this way round. Newcastle players are not useful from game week 33 onwards after their double. Their fixtures at the end of the season are dreadful. We're free hitting in 34 when they've got Ipswich at home. I can get my triple up. That's fine. Game week 33 onwards, apart from that, I don't want Newcastle. So going for Eddie Howe means actually when game week 33 comes around, I only have 2 Newcastle players. And Crystal Palace are really useful from 35 onwards. They have Forest at home, Spurs away, Wolves at home. 3 really good fixtures. They also might double in game week 36. So having triple Palace in my team rather than triple Newcastle in my team from game week 36 onwards or 35 onwards feels like a much better place to be than the Crystal Palace route. Because if Palace suddenly double in 36 and I go the Glasner route, I'll probably have to spend another transfer buying back another Crystal Palace player. Whereas there's pretty much no way I need any Newcastle in my team from game week 33 onwards. So in order to free that up, Gabriel would go and he'd go to Konza because I need the money because Howe and Arteta are both more expensive. And then I'd have to free up a Newcastle spot. And I have 2 ways of doing that. So if I do Gabriel to Konza, I keep my 3 defenders who double in game week 33. So I'll have Munoz still, I'd have Gvardiol, and then I'd buy Konza. So I wouldn't need a doubling defender in place of Burn. So I'd probably go to Milenkovic and double up on the Nottingham Forest defence. Or I do Murphy to Rodgers. And with the money I free up from Gabriel to Konza, I do have the money to do Murphy to Rodgers. So it's either Burn to Milenkovic or Murphy to Rodgers, and then the Gabriel to Konza move to allow and free up a Newcastle spot. It also frees up an Arsenal spot because I have to sell Gabriel, and that would be that assistant manager. So at the moment, I didn't think I'd go anywhere near it, but it's either a high risk, maybe high reward Glasner, or a much safer route on Howe and Arteta. So having a look at what that means for my team and how it lines up. Just before we do that, we are being sponsored by Howe this week. It is a meal that takes literally 30 seconds to prepare. I've been having it with so much to do this week, having it for my lunch and stuff. So check it out, the link in the description. Use the code HarryMarch or scan the QR code on screen. But having a look at my team. So David Raya is going to go in goal. Away at Everton, better than Areola at home to Bournemouth. And with my plan in defence of not buying Saliba, means I want a bit of Arsenal coverage away at Everton. The plan at the moment is to go the Eddie Howe Arteta route, which would mean I would do Dan Burn to Konza and Milenkovic in for Gabriel, or effectively those two would leave and Konza and Milenkovic would come in. Now, I would have a little bit of a benching headache. I'd have Konza versus Milenkovic versus, well, I suppose Williams to start this week. Probably just about favour Konza at home to Forest, although Milenkovic and Forest have been so good defensively that maybe that's where I end up. The other benefit to selling Dan Burn over selling Jacob Murphy, which is probably the way I favour at the moment, is if Eddie Howe keeps a clean sheet, if Newcastle keep a clean sheet, Dan Burn effectively gets 4 points for a clean sheet, whereas Dan Burn gets 4 points, Eddie Howe gets 2. So you get half of it. Whereas if Murphy scores 5 for a goal, but you only get 1 for Eddie Howe, so you're covering less of it. And I think covering a defender with a manager is much easier than covering an attacker, because there's much more swing with an attacker than maybe a defender. Now, if Dan Burn scores, it'll be clipped and I'll remember this. But I think it's most likely that I would sell Dan Burn, because I also don't think he's particularly useful further down the line as well. So I'm going with that as the most likely. Gvardiol, Konza at the moment, Munoz. Milenkovic could start over Konza, though. That is something I'm considering. And then Raya over Areola. Into midfield, the plan at the moment is to bench Sarr. I think Foden will start, having played no minutes midweek against Leicester. Saka is the early kickoff, so maybe we'll hear before the deadline, although the leak we got was exactly on the deadline midweek. So will we hear? Not 100%, but I do predict again that Saka and Foden will both start. So it is Sarr who's dropped to the bench at the moment. Salah in there away at Fulham. Murphy, my final midfielder. Sarr on the bench. And Isak, Marmoush, and Mateta. As I said earlier on the video, at the moment, so the plan is assistant manager on Eddie Howe away at Leicester this week. Hopefully just start it off with a win. In theory, if Alexander Isak was ruled out, I could do Isak to Watkins to free up the Aston Villa spot. Issue is, they'll free up the Newcastle spot and get an Aston Villa player. I'd need Isak to be ruled out until after the double, which I just don't think we're going to get that news. So I think it's very unlikely. And he's currently got the captaincy armband for me over Salah, but depending on what Eddie Howe says, I might switch that around. And in theory, if he misses out completely, Sarr first sub is not the end of the world either. So the plan is 2 free transfers. This is part of the reason I'm glad that I didn't buy Alanga or Bruno in game week 29, although they did do really well, and it would be much better if I had bought them, because at least I have 2 free transfers and I'm not taking a hit now. But I do realize that Bruno Fernandes' points massively outweigh the hit. But anyway, the plan is 2 free transfers, probably going the Howe Arteta route. I don't fully need to decide. It doesn't look like tonight there's any price changes that will force me, so I can probably decide on Friday. Captaincy will depend on what update we get from Newcastle on Alexander Isak, and that is how we're lining up. I did consider the bench boost. I think it's most likely to be the assistant manager, though. So that is where we're at. Probably means only one Arsenal defender, but without Gabriel, maybe it just means they're a little bit weaker anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And I don't love having a double up on the defense. How Arteta is safer. Gabriel being out forces my hand to free up an Arsenal spot potentially, which could potentially make this the best way to go. So that's my current thinking. Haven't confirmed anything at the moment at time of recording. If I do, I'll drop it in the pinned section of the comments. Yeah, if you've got Parliament tonight, and as a Chelsea fan, I hope it goes well. We'll be back later on Friday afternoon with final decisions and all that good stuff as well. Enjoy your tinkering. If you need a wildcard draft, it will be there. Players to buy, we'll discuss lots in that video as well. So drop any questions you have in the comments. If we don't answer it in the comments, we'll answer it on that video later. Have a great one. Thank you all for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.